All right. So about 23 years ago, some of you were not born, some of you were really early, or not early, but young at that age. But about 23 years ago, I was serving as a pastoral intern at one of our local churches here in the Northwest. And one day, the pastor and I decided to go check out a new place we could go fishing and crabbing. So we migrated from Tacoma to Federal Way to Dash Point Pier. I had never been to Dash Point Pier ever. And when we got there, the place was pretty much deserted. Just one guy on the beach who had a kind of hippie vibe. And we started walking along the pier, just kind of looking around to see if there was any fish. And then we noticed that hippie-looking guy on the beach, he was muttering to himself kind of words that were off, words that just seemed a bit strange. And at first, we just kind of brushed it off, but then it got weirder. And because he was facing the Puget Sound and noise amplifies on the water, and we were on the pier, even the quietest of words were being amplified. And he started speaking in some kind of like gibberish. It wasn't a known language as far as I could tell. And it had almost like a strange tongue, and every now and then he would throw in the words Jesus Christ. But it wasn't like pleasant, it was like mocking. Jesus Christ, right? It's bizarre. And the whole thing felt off. And it wasn't just odd, but it felt threatening. I don't know if you've ever felt that way when you encounter somebody who is just off, and just really off, and just something inside of you makes the hairs kind of stick on end. That's what it felt like. And it had a very spiritual feel to it. And here's the thing. I knew that the other pastor that I was with, he had experiences in casting out demons. So I'm like, I'm all good. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is this about to turn into a spiritual showdown at Dash Point Pier? See, that day at Dash Point gave me a small glimpse, a small experience of what we're about to see in today's passage. So if you're able, I have a long one today, 20 verses. Would you please stand for the reading of God's word? It comes from Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. And they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately, there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains. But he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran, fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on a hillside. And they begged him, these are demons, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." And so Jesus gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out of the man, entered the pigs and the herd, numbering about 2,000. They rushed down the steep bank into the sea, drowned in the sea. And the herdsmen fled and told it in the city and the country. And the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had the legion, sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And then they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. As he was getting back into the boat, a man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but he said to him, "Go home to your friends, tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and he began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. You may have a seat. So today, we are looking at this. We're looking at how Jesus turns trauma, or how he transforms trauma into a testimony. So we'll break it down into three things. Number one, we'll look at trauma. Number two, we will look at transformation. And lastly, we'll end at turning it all into a testimony. How Jesus turns trauma into testimony. Now, in order to understand what's happening with this demon-possessed man, you have to go to the previous verse, right? And you have to look at what story occurred right before Jesus getting to the land of the Gerasenes. If you grew up in church, you'll know this story. Jesus gets into a boat. He's exhausted from ministry. He conks out, and then there's like a mild hurricane on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples are freaked out because they think that they're about to die. They're mad at Jesus because he's not helping bail water out of the boat. Jesus wakes up. He looks at the storm. He says, "Peace, be still." Immediately, all the energy in the waves stand still. And the disciples are more freaked out after the occurrence of Jesus' stilling of the waters than at the actual storm itself, because they wondered, who is this person that can, with a word, calm storms? So the disciples are discombobulated. They're filled with confusion, awe, and wonder. And then they get out of the boat, and boom, a demon-possessed man runs up to Jesus. What a scene. One of the most bizarre scenes that we have recorded of Jesus. I think it's a really good one, and it's exciting. The storm, it was violent, untamable, out of control, created fear in the lives of the disciples. Mark, who's writing this for Peter, because he's a traveling companion of Peter, it's almost as if he's saying that, do you see the uncontrollable, violent nature of the storm itself? That storm was living inside of that man. Could you imagine how intimidating it must have been to encounter him at the shores of the Gerasenes? This man was out of control. This man couldn't be subdued. Like in today's culture, no amount of psychotic medication, no amount of restraints, nothing could subdue and control him. He was out of control. I don't know if you've been around people who are literally just cuckoo. It's not very pleasant to be around, because you start feeling all sorts of things and you feel like your life is in danger. This is what was going on the shores. And this guy, demon-possessed man, he lived in a cemetery. Who does that? Who would camp out at the local cemetery for a few days? I mean, maybe if someone offered you a lot of money, but that's just creepy. He lived in the tombs. No one can bind him anymore. This man was somebody who was obviously tormented. Night and day, he would cry out. He would go to the mountaintops and he would yell, even cutting himself with stones. And I thought about, what does this mean? Well, later on, you see when Jesus asks, "What's your name?" and he goes, "Legion." Legion is a military term that denotes about 5,000 to 6,000 Roman soldiers. 5,000 Roman soldiers living inside. Could you imagine all wanting to get your attention? 5,000 voices, boom, boom, nonstop, can't shut it off. And I think the reason why he yells night and day is because there's just for one moment, he wants to be able to calm all the other voices and just be able to hear his own voice, to give him some semblance of peace. And it also shares that he cuts himself with stones. I don't know if you've ever experienced or if you've ever known somebody who cuts themselves. I ministered to one of my congregation members way back when, and he said, "I don't cut myself anymore with razors because, that's not good." But what he said was fascinating. He says, "I get a red felt-tipped marker, really fine, and I create the slash marks." And he says he does that because when he looks at it, he imagined that his body's bleeding and that the pressure that he's experiencing inside is being released and relieved. I think that's what was happening with this demoniac man. He was being so tormented inside, nothing he could do would be able to release these voices, release these feelings. He was going crazy. Now I want you to think about this. Why would anyone choose to live among the tombs? It sounds strange to us, but I think what it is this, and see if this resonates with you. People often drift towards places that mirror what's happening inside of them. If you feel dead inside, you start hanging around dead places. If you feel hopeless, you end up in hopeless environments. Why? To get some relief, to get in some twisted way, someone to identify and just give witness that you're going through that. The man wasn't just living among the tombs. The tombs were a picture of his soul. Lifeless, broken, cut off from people. And we do the exact same thing. Some of us, when we're hurting, we shut people out. We retreat into our dark thoughts. In others, we numb ourselves with substances or relationships or just scrolling social media for hours just to escape reality. Now, in that culture back then, if you were hanging around places that had dead stuff, you were unclean ceremonially. And in a very kind of extreme religious culture, the thing that they wanted to do was become pure so that they could be accepted before God. The last thing they wanted to do was become impure. Everybody knew who this guy was, everybody. And notice, if he's walking down the street, what is your first reaction? Get as far away from him as possible so you don't become unclean. Could you imagine that? Every time, everywhere you go, people are just making an exit. Just feeling like you are a loser, that you are a loner, feeling all alone. And it adds to this man's brokenness and his trauma. Do you know what trauma is, guys? It's not when you experience pain. Every single person experiences pain. Two people can experience the same amount of pain. For one person, it becomes very traumatic. For one other person, it becomes a life lesson. turns into trauma when you feel like there's no one else that you can share it with. No one who will really listen without judgment. So instead of letting it out, what do? You hold it in. And if you would have let it out, you would have experienced the healing a little bit better. And in some particular contexts and cultures, it is not okay to share brokenness because it's easy to be judged. And so we like to clothe it with a lot of niceties. I'm all good. Yeah, it was hard, but it wasn't all that bad. And it just continues the trauma. Have you opened yourself up to the things that have really hurt and given permission for another person to enter, to ask questions, to be a presence, to hold it? If you do that, it begins your healing from trauma. But it's a really scary thing to think. I don't know if Pastor Jeff shared this last week, but one of the ways in which we can kind of be with people is be vulnerable. Vulnerability is not just reciting facts about your pain, but it's about sharing honestly the feelings that are associated with the facts. Yeah, I got run over by a car. That's a fact. But if you want to be vulnerable and help heal the heart, you have to share, how did you feel? I felt like my life was over because I was a track star. I felt like I was a loser. That's vulnerability. So I want to encourage us to step forward and take a step towards vulnerability, sharing feelings around the facts and not substituting the feelings for the facts. Does that make sense? I hope so. And this is why we're trying to do community groups in the way that we're doing. Are we 100% there yet? No. But are we moving in that direction? Yes. Because we know that we need community to work these things out. So we look at trauma. Secondly, I want to look at transformation. Jesus transforms this man's trauma. How do you experience transformation? It's when we are seen and when we are loved by Jesus and his people. Psalms 34:18. It says this: "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit." When you feel like no one understands, God does. And he doesn't just understand, he draws near to you. My first semester in seminary in the East Coast, I remember I was feeling so unworthy, and I felt like a loser. And I'm going to be pretty open and transparent, right? Because I was sitting because listen, I'm not a good student, right? I love to learn. I have an inquisitive mind. But to be a good student, you need to have discipline. And it helps if you have a good memory, too, which I don't either, right? And so I just wasn't a good student, but I was there. I just wanted to learn. And it was really intimidating. It's like the people that were my classmates, all from Harvard, MIT, all the top-notch school. And, I went to just a regular private school, nothing fancy. And so every day I would be reminded of how much of a loser I am academically. And so I remember every day driving onto the campus, I would have this weight on my chest. You ever have that feeling where you can't get that satisfying breath? It's like no matter how much you breathe, it's like, oh shoot, how come I can't get that feeling where it feels satisfying? That was every day. And it was so bad that I had alopecia. Do you know what alopecia is? Your body is undergoing so much stress that you just randomly lose hair. And it's so much so where you don't even see the hair follicles. It's like just smooth. And I was like, I've got cancer, right? I was like, what is going on? I was going through so much stress. And I remember in the midst of all this was maybe a couple of months into seminary, I was sitting across the bed from my roommate, and I was sharing all this. And I was like, I just think that God doesn't love me. I just feel like a loser. I don't know about my call to ministry. Just moping on myself. Woe is me. And then he looks to me and he goes, right? We're sitting on our beds looking at each other. He goes, Kevin, that's not of God. And then, I kid you not, I felt something lift literally felt something lift off of my body. I wasn't demon possessed, okay? Right? I think maybe oppressed or something, but something lifted off, right? And I go, yo, did you feel that? He goes, yeah, what was that? He felt it too. Something lifted, right? But it was from that moment that I felt free. See, an encounter with truth, encounter with Jesus sets people free. And this is what happened with this man. This man didn't know Jesus, but the demons knew Jesus. And real quick, not all craziness is demon possession. Don't make the mistake. There is like true mental illness. How do you distinguish the two? I can go deeper into this if you sign up for Living Life, which tomorrow's the deadline, right? For real, right? But think about it. If you're really demonically possessed and you take antipsychotics, it doesn't work because it's not a mental thing. It's a spiritual thing, right? So that's how you can tell, right? But it's not as common as you guys think it is, right? We read in the Bible, it's like all over. Well, that's because they wanted to focus and concentrate on those events. But it exists. It's real. Some of you may be experiencing this. Some of you may be in houses where it's like, oh my gosh, finally, someone gets me. It's like, why does like doors slam and dishes fall off and like weird things happen? Like my heart says, no, it's normal. Something might be going on, so let's talk, right, after the service. When this man confronts Jesus, Jesus says, what's your name? He says, my name is Legion. And then with a single word, Jesus casts it out. And the demons go into pigs. Why pigs? Pigs are considered unclean animals. Okay? And Jesus knew, because it's like, why is Jesus negotiating with demons? That seems a little strange. But Jesus is infinitely wise. Because he knew as soon as the demons entered the pigs, he knew where they were going to head. They were going to head off the cliff into the water, into the Sea of Galilee. In Jewish culture, water represented judgment. And so Jesus is like, oh, you want to head into the pigs? Pigs are going into the water, ultimately to their judgment. Okay, I get what I want, so boom. And as soon as Jesus does that, the townspeople are freaking out. You know how much 2,000 pigs back then cost? A lot of money. Jesus just ruined a lot. He just bankrupted a lot of people. And they're mad. And so they would rather have Jesus, who just performed this miraculous exorcism, away than for him to stay, to teach, to heal, and to continue his ministry. So I want to say that no matter how many chains, no matter how tormented you feel and are, Jesus, if he shows up, even with a single word, can release and free you. For some, it's going to be a single moment. Boom, it's done. For others, it's a process. Jesus gets to choose based upon his infinite wisdom. So I want to let you guys know those tormenting thoughts, right? It's like nothing you do can break it. And it just makes you feel like crud. And it just makes you feel more hopeless, not good inside. Jesus can free you. And he wants to. We just have to allow him to. Lastly, testimony. The man goes up to Jesus and he says, listen, I want to follow you. I want to become your disciple. And you know what Jesus says? Nah, go home. He sends him to the place that's hardest to bear witness, to his family members and to his town. Now, I want to back up a little bit. How many demons were inside this guy approximately? About 5,000. The gospel and the news about Jesus had not yet penetrated or infiltrated into the Gentile area. Guess the gate, which was Gerasenes, the entrance point into the Gentile territory, guess who was standing there? A spiritual military through this one guy, guarding the gate, not wanting Jesus and the good news to penetrate in. Why? Because he knew that if you got through this man, if you got through these gates, Gerasenes, you would begin a movement, the gospel movement. And what Jesus does is to this guy who has this tremendous testimony, he says, go home and share what has happened to you. I want to if you're a follower of Jesus, you have a testimony, right? You have a testimony. I know some of you, you grew up in church, baptized in church, you didn't miss Sunday school, didn't miss youth group, everything was church. Like, I don't have much of a testimony. My life is pretty boring. You know how many people would die to have a testimony like that? To escape the trauma and chaos of their life? And for you to share how faithful God was through your parents and through other circumstances to raise you in this way so that you could be where you're at, that's a miracle. Your testimony, whether you know a lot of theology or not, because this man knew zero theology, all he knew was what God did for him, which was delivered him. And he shared that. And that was enough to whet people's spiritual appetites, to draw people to Jesus. You all have a testimony, right? You don't have to go preach. Just share what God has been doing. And you'll see amazing things follow. Now, when we were at the Dash Point Pier, towards the edge, we kept seeing the man getting closer and closer, and then he started to walk on the pier itself, walking towards us. What would you do, right? I'm freaking out. I don't know about this other pastor. So we're talking, pretending like nothing's bothering us, and he just keeps walking, and then he turns to where we're at, and then he stops halfway. And then you can definitely hear what he's saying. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. And I'm like, what is going on? Right? Now I look back, I'm like, he probably took some drugs, maybe some mushrooms. I don't know. He took something. He probably had mental illness on top of that, mixed in with a little bit of demonic stuff. Perfect recipe. So I'm like, what is going to happen? So we're needing to go. So I'm like, Pastor, you first. So we walk. Pastor locks eyes on the guy, doesn't take his eyes off of him, right? And the guy is like avoiding eye contact, looking down, still murmuring a thing. I'm like, oh, shoot. I'm like, what? I'm going to die. Like, what's going to happen, right? And we just keep walking. He just locks eyes, but nothing. The guy's just in his own thing, own world, doing his own thing as if we weren't even there. So no showdown, no demon possession, no exorcism, nothing like that. And what I realized is if that man wanted to be free, I think we could have helped. And definitely, I knew the heart of Jesus, that he would have done everything he could to help free that person. Okay. Some of us may be having tormenting thoughts. We can't sleep. Now, I'm not saying you're demon-possessed, but you're definitely demon-oppressed, heavily influenced, to the point where you just feel like, I can't get any reprieve. I'd love to pray for you. Just find me out. But you don't have to experience this anymore. It's real. But not all oppressive thoughts are demons. Some is just bad habits that you need to break and repent of. But then there's others that no matter how much you repent, it can't get cast out because it's another spirit. So I'll end with this. The way that we begin to trust Jesus as the great healer, the one who transforms our trauma into a testimony, is when we realize that on the cross, Jesus and this demoniac man trade places. You say, how did that happen? Well, Jesus was on the cross in some kind of tomb where criminals and people would be left to rot. And on the cross, Jesus uttered all kinds of crazy words that when people listen, they're like, what? Forgive them, for they know not what they do? It is finished? What's going on? And it was on the cross that Jesus was experiencing tremendous amount of torment. That storm that was inside of the man, that was in the sea, Jesus was experiencing something even far greater. The storm of becoming the sacrifice to atone for sin. He didn't bail, guys, on the cross. You know why? He loves you. He wants you to experience freedom. He's here for you. He's wanting the best for you. And when we recognize what Jesus did, and that literally his spirit was given so that it could live inside of us, everything changes. Let Jesus transform your trauma, your trials, your hurts into a testimony that will bring him acknowledgement.